Miss Sophie.
She is. Oh, she.
I didn't. I went into the.
Yes, because after your property is over a certain amount.
Yeah, when it's over a certain amount, it starts to decline.
Yeah. Who says that?
The provincial government says that,
That's all the word law.
yeah. It's the
Oh,
same.
you here.
It's the same.
I had a brownie, thank you very much.
There's a couple left, you want another?
Amount.
She was the first administrator.
So whether you
Yes.
live in
She's interim.
Whether you live in Vancouver or whether you live in Phoenix, the threshold is the same.
same across the
Great.
road.
That's right. I don't remember the name, but I remember there was a sort of little teaser.
So there,
If you're sitting in a
I heard the
property
first
which
planner
each
and
year
all that.
going to be assessment, there is
One with that side, and-
you can do.
Rick Page.
Is Sophie gonna be here, I hope, or are you gonna do it?
I know someone here, she's not till later.
Yeah.
You're stressing
And
me
you know
out.
the thresholds get adjusted.
Well, we're gonna do it
they
right.
adjusted it.
I'm not sure.
This, for this thing?
Oh.
Well, that's something else.
So they
Oh,
set
I
that
see.
threshold so
Yeah.
that 90%
Hang on, just one
of
second.
the homes in the province will qualify. So it exempts the 10%, so the highest 10% or is expected to have 90% qualify in one way or another.
Do you know when it's due for re-review soon?
It should, they typically will set that in around now. So I'll take a look on their website at what it is. I haven't checked.
Because in Bowen, believe it or not, you've got a lot of people 65-year-old there. Just on how those apparently just gone to the street.
On that very simple.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
When they painted the parking lot, isn't it 55 and older?
It's 55. No,
55,
Were you
55.
all ready to go? Just so you know, better, are you gonna wait until Hope gets here?
No, I think, I
so
think
we're not gonna do this.
55.
Oh,
Like,
okay,
from
you're gonna
the
do
islands,
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can start deferring at
he's not doing
55, but I
one.
believe
The one she
the,
prepared?
This is
She
the,
is.
this is the
She
house.
was up
homeowner
there.
grant at
Yeah, yeah.
65. Homeowner
I
grant.
think it-
Oh, that's
it's
so
just
good.
based when your
Gary, do you
property
still
is.
have-
No, sorry, I'm
Yeah,
gonna go
yeah.
back. The additional homeowner grant.
I really had to do that. I really had to do that. There's a significance there.
Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, just before we get started here, happy birthday to the Bowen Island Municipality.
Happy
Happy birthday! We're just past 20 years, we've been by a few days, and Sophie put together a really nice photo operation here, so it's gonna look good.
I was gonna bring all the.
Meanwhile, I'll just, and I got some talking points here, I'll just go through as you watch that. So 20 years ago, on December 4th, 1999, Bowen Island was incorporated as an island municipality under the Islands Trust. The incorporation referendum was held June 19th, 1999. The letters patent were signed September 2nd, 1999. First election was held November 20th, 1999. The cast of characters: Mayor Lisa Barrett, councillors Ross Carter, Peter Frinton, Alan Lee, Allison Morris, Bob Turner, and Richard Underhill were elected for the term of 3 years. The inaugural council meeting was held December 4th, 1999 at the Union Steamship store, which is now the Bowen Island Library. Bowen's own judge, Judy Getty, administered the oaths of office. Minister of Municipal Affairs, Jim Doyle, presented the letters patent and ceremonial gavel.
There it is.
There it is. And it works, sort of. Council's very first order of business was to appoint Councillor Allison Morris to chair the Finance Committee. Councilor Morris is here today serving her 7th consecutive council term. Also here, still present in the municipality from the beginning, Sandy Ledrum, of course, in the building department, and Kathy Lalonde, our CAO. Council then made appointments to the Islands Trust and the GVRD, the manager and approving officer, banker, and signing officers. Then council gave readings to bylaws number 1, 2, and 3, which were for council procedure, a provisional budget, and to establish officer positions. 20 years later, we are here today again in the 7th term. So we've come a long way. I won't. This is historical stuff. Did everybody get a chance?
You were right on, you were right on cue.
Going forward, we've come a long way. We started with a piece of paper and an intent to start up our own municipality, to be a little bit more independent. And 20 years later, here we are with which I think is a real good organization here. Responsive, full government, local government as it were. But I think we've done so much work. When I just started thinking about this afternoon and the work that's been done in the last 20 years, it's been absolutely fantastic. We have the difficult task of balancing the needs of the growing community at the same time preserving the unique character of the community, which we all enjoy. Going forward, we have some large capital large capital projects and expenses that we'd like to get behind us, and we'd like to just move on with some more strategic plans and sort of look after our environment here. And I think the municipality is going to be in a really good place very shortly. I think we're still in the growing phase and that sort of thing. We've had a few issues, which are all really positive, and challenges, which tests the system that we have out there and the system that's been built over the 20 years. And I think we respond to that, and we understand that there's going to be change, and I think we're in a really good position to move on. What I would like to do is just thank everybody. For the record, all those who have gone before us during the 20 years, staff and elected officials, thank you for taking care of our island community. We really appreciate it, and we'll do the best we can the next 20 years to keep it going. Thank you again, and congratulations, Bowen Island Municipality. Okay, so we're going to move on to the actual agenda, the opening, the council meeting. We did that, the approval of the agenda. We have some late items.
There were 3 items circulated earlier today by email in regards to Mannion Bay from Bruce Russell. The noise mitigation plan in regards to the noise exemption application, which is item 3.6, and a letter from Bill Granger on a few different topics, specifically 8.2 and 10.1.
Okay. All right, somebody approved the agenda with the addendums? Thanks, Rob and David, you got it, thank you. All in favor? That is approved. Public comments, I know we have one.
We do. That would be Bruce Russell regarding Mannion
All right,
Bay.
step right up, Mr. Russell.
Could I just get a clarification, please? Nobody else is speaking. Do I get the full 15 minutes?
It's only set for 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
try.
Well, first of all, my name is Bruce Russell, 303 Robert Road. I want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak. And first on my agenda is to welcome Bonny back to the fold. Nice to see you back here, Bonny. Thank you very much for your return. And to Dennis Beck, who I've never had the pleasure of meeting, but we did exchange a couple of emails. I will be very short, and I think there's 2 words that are going to be the takeaway from what short presentation I have to make, and that's more proactive. I think that's what the council and the municipality has to be with respect to the Mannion Bay situation. And I am, of course, speaking on the heels of the December 9th report put forward by Bonny for council's consideration. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and also as a spokesperson for the Friends of Mannion Bay, who have been probably working for some 10 years for the betterment of the bay and the resolution of the issues. I really do believe that we've made some tremendous progress, and for that I do want to thank the Bylaw Department, Council, certainly Bonny, and having said that, I dare say I think we're at a stage right now where we're losing a little bit of traction, and we're very concerned about that. And I think part and parcel of the reasons for that is myself and a number of other similar thinking individuals do not think that the municipality has been as aggressive as they should be with the enforcement. In fact, I think we're very passive. The reason that the boats that have been removed, for the most part, are removed is because of reactionary action on the part of council. Mother Nature is proactive first, and either beaches the boats or sinks the boats, and then that brings, for the most part, the municipality into action. And we don't think that's right, and with the buildup of boats that we have right now, we have 2 sunk boats in Mannion Bay right now. I know that the report that Bonny put out said there was 3 boats of seaworthiness concern. Well, I can tell you, I think 2 of those 3 boats, if we're thinking about the same boats, they're now sunk. And the sad part of it is the owners of those 2 boats have a history of being problem boat owners in the bay. And that we find extremely frustrating, that time after time after time. One boat that sunk the owner has had 3 or 4 previous boats that the municipality has had to spend the money to get rid of. And we just don't understand why we continue to allow that type of a situation to happen. We have no respect for the rules and regulations, and we think that a stop has to be put to that. So primarily what I'm here to ask council to do, and Bonny will have to speak for herself, I don't like to put words in anybody's mouth, let alone Bonny's, but I think they have to be given more tools to work with. I am accused on occasion of writing too often, communicating with staff and council, and I accept that abuse accordingly, but we can't do our jobs in trying to help and work with the municipality unless we communicate when things happen. And there's a number of us in the bay that are right there. We almost consider ourselves as a staff person, because we can see boats coming, we can see them going, we can see them sinking, we can see them going on the beach. The staff doesn't have to be there. And so I think we do burden staff with an awful lot of communications, requests for information, offers for assistance, and that type of thing. And I think council really does have to give them more support, be it financial, be it people, because if we maintain the status quo, I will almost guarantee you we will never resolve the boat problem in Mannion Bay. And if you just look at the buildup of boats right today, that is because our form of enforcement is to issue notices, followed by a ticket, followed by a fine. I don't know what the statistics are, but I'll almost guess that very few fines are paid. And secondly, I don't think any notice or any fine has caused one offending, problematical boat owner to remove their boat from the bay. So I ask you, is that effective? Is that working? I think the answer is no. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. That's it? All right. Okay, we're gonna move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything in the consent agenda they're not happy with? More than, sorry?
3.1, just a small fix.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to
Yes.
just ask Paul 3.4 to give Bonny a chance just to maybe update and respond
Okay.
to the
Thank you.
3.5.
2.5 for Allison. Oh. Okay. Rob, you had your hand up?
No, I'm good.
David?
3.9?
No, it's nice you put them all in order. All right, did we get them all? Good. Thank you. Okay, so the council approved the items as outlined in the December 9, 2019 council agenda as amended.
The consent agenda.
Consent agenda, is that what I said?
Okay, so
Council,
council.
yeah.
It's okay. Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, second over to Allison and all in favor. Thank you. So we're gonna, and those will all be in section 10, I believe.
11, I think.
11 this time? Okay. Right down to 12, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Is there some way we can calm
Um, Yeah, we'll look at that.
With the,
Oh, it doesn't matter, we're all the way down. Oh, she's on number 9 anyhow, probably.
Yeah, it should be all right. We'll take a look at it as we go through
We can move
them.
it to 6.3.
Sorry?
6.3?
Well, Bonnie's here for 9.1 frog, so it doesn't,
Oh,
we
okay,
don't
right.
leave it where it is.
Okay, sorry, just catching up here. Okay, so we have no delegations, nor do we have business arising from the minutes, so we're gonna move right into staff reports. Emma Chow, active design guidelines. Emma?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So just bringing back a set of design guidelines that were presented to Council, I believe, 2 months, end of September, several months ago. These are the active design guidelines that is an action item out of the transportation plan. It's one of the first action items because it is intended to help assure that all new development on Bowen Island considers active transportation for the island to help facilitate and encourage active transportation. And it has actually encompassed more than just transportation, as well as a daily way of life for people, termed active living, to help improve both physical, social, and mental well-being of the public. And this set of guidelines has been circulated to several committees. I won't name all of them because there's quite a few and they're all in the report. We have gotten really great feedback from all of the committees, and I would say, in a nutshell, almost all of the feedback pertains to making the guidelines more Bowen specific. There was generally very positive feedback and good support for the guidelines, but they were felt to be a bit urban in some places, and a lot of the examples were not very applicable to Bowen. So I have gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and swapped out a lot of the more urban language with more Bowen relevant language and examples. And there was also mention of water transportation being an island, and really focusing on our natural assets, which we celebrate on Bowen. And with that, I've also drafted a policy to accompany the guidelines and give it more direction on how it should be used by staff and council. And essentially, this is just encouraging the public and developers to review and apply these guidelines when they're considering new development on the island, and also for council to apply them when reviewing discretionary development approvals.
Emma, do you consider that there was a gap in our planning, in the planning department in this area?
In terms of considering active transportation in new development?
Yeah. I was thinking more of the paths and that sort of thing, you know, because we always try to put paths in and that sort of thing, but that would only be a part of it, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement, and I think it's something that the transportation plan and the parks plan that have only been adopted last year. Both those plans really address that gap, but there's also there's still, in terms of process, we need a little bit more clarity in how to apply those plans, and I think this document really helps with that.
Yeah, and my concern, to be quite candid, is we got to be careful about overlap and a whole bunch of different procedures. I'm sure you're very aware of that. And my other question would be developer. How do you define developer? Is somebody building a house on his property a developer? And he would have to go through all these guidelines.
I think like they're intended for any level of that, but in terms of where staff come in, like if somebody's coming from for a building permit.
Yeah.
We would be saying, well, here's this information we have if you want to make your place more walkable.
Yeah.
As opposed to if somebody's coming from a rezoning, we're probably then saying, okay, this is one of the lenses council will use to evaluate it, so we want you to look at it, and we're actually having feedback, but somebody just building their house, we're saying, if you're interested, this is information for you, as opposed to if you're rezoning, we're saying, we want you to do these things where possible.
Okay, that was my sort of concern, is that, we're getting a lot of overlap, and it's becoming more and more cumbersome all the time for, especially private property owners, just single lot owners, but.
And that's why the
If it's a
guide,
trade-off for,
Yeah.
for something in the development, obviously, or rezoning or something.
they're actually formatted into the different stages of development. So someone building their house would only really look at the last stage of building.
Oh, okay.
For
All
a
right,
house. Yeah, and then as Daniel mentioned, more of the planning conceptual phase to the rezoning subdivision phase, there's like more specific guidelines to those stages of
Yeah.
development. And obviously, these are guidelines as in,
Yeah.
we can't force them
Yeah,
to people, but I think the best practices, that's good to get out there.
yeah. Well, you can heavily suggest, if we're giving them a rezoning or
Yeah, more so
something like that.
rezoning.
Yeah, of course. Okay, well, that's good. Who else? Anybody else?
I was just gonna, to your point, Gary, a little bit, or some of your worries, on page 5 of the document, it has a little paragraph on constraints. And I'll read this for a sentence. Recognizing that some design features have environmental, financial, or other constraints, not every guideline will be feasible or applicable to your development project, and it goes on and so on. So it's, these are guidelines, as Emma's saying, it's not something that, oh my God, there's another burden that,
Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
yeah, I support it. I think, it came out of the transportation plan. It's supported in the draft climate change strategy would speak to this, and so I think it's,
No, I think it's
there's a prophet at UBC, Larry Frank, who does a lot of work on health and walkability and so on, and walking is really good for your health.
Absolutely. 300%. So first and then Maureen?
I'm just going to speak in support of this plan and our adopting it too, because I think this is something, as you point out, that people have tried to work towards over the years with trails and paths, and this, I think, formalizes it a little more and says why, and also helps people think ahead to climate things, or when their family is going to school, how will kids be able to ride my bike? Maybe I'll put my driveway over here so they can see around the corner, those kinds of things. So I just think
Consciousness, yeah.
it's helpful, yeah.
Very good. Maureen?
Thanks. Thank you, Emma. This reflects a heck of a lot of work. I have a couple of suggestions. One is that I think that paragraph that David referred to regarding constraints is incredibly important. And I don't think it should be on the 5th page. I think it should be right at the very front of this document. I mean, even put it on the contents page. You need to work with the design a wee bit. But I think clarifying the standing of these would go a long way to putting people in the right frame for going through the rest of the document. The second point is I agree with the feedback from, was it the APC? The APC, their last bit of feedback was they felt that the title should be reconsidered for better clarity. So, I mean, my first impulse was yes, it should be. And then I started looking at what's done in some other communities, and this is clearly recognized planning term. But what I might suggest is that you give it a subtitle that clarifies to a lay reader what active design guidelines are intended to do. And I think those two pieces would help. And then the third point is this triggered my editing gene as I was going through it. And it brought to mind again something that we had talked about in the communications team about developing a style guide for the major publications that are produced by the municipality. I mean, when it comes to memos and internal reports and so on, I don't really care, but I do care with something as attractive as this to make sure that stylistically it's consistent, or it reflects some sort of consistency with other publications from the municipality. So it's at the level of niggly copy editing stuff that I won't bore people with, but I can send you an annotated copy and just flag where there's some points that, a style sheet that addresses not the technical terminology, but simply you should spell this word that way and do it consistently in municipal publications. I know that Sophie has wanted to pull that together for a while and just hasn't had an opportunity to do so. This may be the piece that triggers that work. So it's a very good job. Thank you.
Oh, you have your hand up?
I was just gonna mention that Sophie is something she is working on.
Great.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Mike.
Just very quickly. Listen, thank you very much. And I particularly like the visual aspect of it, by the way, because you talk about guidelines, and you can't describe guidelines in prose. So thank you. Do you anticipate, because this is new, do you anticipate doing like a review every period of time? Because based on the feedback you get and what it actually means, and do you sort of see it being reviewed? So put a review period in after a year, 2 years? And if, by the way, you wrote that somewhere in the print, and I'm sorry if I missed it.
No, I didn't write it in the print, and I haven't built in a review period at all. But I do, I would imagine if there were some significant issues that come up, we would definitely revise it.
Because I often think with a review period, if you say I am actually going to diarise it, I'm going to review this in whatever period you think, a year, 18 months, 2 years, whatever you think's right, then you do tend to pull it for review. Because otherwise, yes, people might comment on it, but it kind of just gets lost with things. But if it's actually said, I'm going to review that. We did it 2 years ago. I want to see how it looks today, and do I need to make any changes? I'd be grateful because it's, this is something new and it's exciting, and I'd like to see it staying that way.
Allison?
Well,
Then
picking
Maureen.
up a little bit on what Maureen was saying, I sort of found the policy cover page a little bit brief. And that constraints thing maybe should be right in that policy cover page. The same with page 4, who is this for? Who is this guide for? And it then talks about a developer, the planner, and a community member. And it more explains what it's going to be, because so why would I want to open this and read it, I guess, and not get my back up before I get started? And then I'm not quite sure what point 5 means. In considering applications for discretionary development, council is to evaluate that all design areas in the ADG have been addressed in the proposed development. So is that one of these checklists that the applicant's going to have to fill out before they put in their DVP or their building permit, or?
Yeah, the guidelines are all related to one of 4 design areas, and that's the little icons beside each of the guidelines. So it's just to make sure that all of those design areas have been considered in the development.
So, but if in your intro, we were talking about them applying for a building permit, so before somebody, when they put in their building permit, they're gonna have to fill out this design checklist on page 16?
Well, a development permit is not discretionary, but we would encourage it. Encourage them to have a look and try to fill it out.
Okay, but if they're asking for a DP or a rezoning, then this will have to be included in their rezoning package? Is that what 5.5 means? Then they
that's
have to
what
fill
point
out
is.
page 16?
Is in terms of rezoning, then we would use this as a way to evaluate their
Okay,
proposal,
but-
and so we would give it to them, yes.
So where it says, in considering applications for discretionary development approvals, which as a layperson I would have no idea what that was, council is to evaluate that all design areas in the ADG have been addressed in the proposed development. Now, addressed means they've considered them, or it means that they've incorporated them?
So, and the checklist has essentially 3 in, so it says if they've been addressed.
And this is the checklist on page
Yeah.
16 or 18?
And so then, let's say if design area is not addressed, please explain why. So we would like to know that they've thought about it and they're not doing it, as opposed to, I didn't even think about putting in a connecting path. So it may be, you know, and the council has to weigh the trade-offs. If they say, well, there's no connecting path here because we don't want to be adjacent land and we can't connect to it, or this is an environmentally sensitive area, so we're you know, preserving it and not putting a path through it. Well, those are reasons that they would give, but they thought about it. And it's,
Yeah. It's again going back to like that these are guidelines and, you know, we actually explicitly say we understand there are constraints, but just to make sure that the developer has considered and if there are constraints to at least identify if they were.
And I just to dovetail on that, I think one of the, you know, a bonus for the developer is that they, if they're asking for something, and they can't go in certain areas, they can say, hey, but, you know, within these design guidelines, we can offer this, a connecting pathway, this, so they can also see, hey, what is a municipality looking for, and okay, we can't do it here, but you know what, we can touch these areas here, and that can help with their rezoning or our decision on that, so, yeah.
All right, Maureen?
So discretionary development is a synonym for rezonings?
There are development approvals that would come to council.
ADP.
The most common, the most common would be like a rezoning or a variance.
I have the same, I'm not sure that that would be entirely clear either. The addressed, I would feel more comfortable with considered, because addressed seems to me that you've actually met a requirement, whereas considered somebody, that's actually what you're asking them to do on the checklist.
How's everybody with that? I think that's good, I like that one.
And what about putting the constraints and the, who this is for in the actual policy? Maybe expand the reason for the policy?
Emma's got suggestions from two councillors, maybe she can figure out where to put them. Or we can,
We don't have to rewrite the thing here now, do we?
Well, no, but I don't want to pass it the way it is either.
Oh.
So,
I move that council adopt the active design guidelines policy 19.06, 1906,
okay, as amended,
As discussed.
as
as discussed.
As discussed, I'll second
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's for the amendment, and David for a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, that's what we're.
I just thought I'd
we're
put it on the
asking to
table.
do.
Yeah, but adding as discussed means nothing. It means,
Oh, okay.
as amended means at least that it's going to be all the suggestions that Maureen and I have made, or just some of them, or what?
Well, that's good, that's a good
Worship,
question.
let me jump in here.
Yeah, by all means.
Where others would.
Yeah.
Spirit of trend, yeah.
I personally think that having the constraint statement in the actual guidelines themselves makes a lot of sense. I think it makes sense to bring it up to the beginning of the document, not on page 5, but I think it needs to be in that document. If you want to add it to the policy as well, no harm done. But I wouldn't take it out of the guidelines themselves. I think that's important, because that's more likely what the developers, the homeowners are going to read.
Look at it.
Versus going back to the policy. And I would say that relative to any other definitions that you want to add too. I wouldn't take it out of one and put it in the other. If you want to duplicate it, that's one thing.
But the guidelines are Appendix A, which is that they're part of the policy.
I just know that they're going to be looking at that colorful
Yeah.
policy guideline booklet.
But if it's a link in the policy, I don't know how it's going to be portrayed on the website, if we have a section that's called policy.
Well, the policy is a jurisdictional part of it, and I agree with Maureen's thing there, that we change that. I'd like to change the addressed to considered.
Is there any urgency? Could this just be held off and brought back just with some changes.
Well, we do
Yeah.
that, and then you guys can set the changes.
Yeah, 'cause,
Yeah, bring it
I
back.
think there's support for it, it's just like the wordsmithing, just
Yeah.
little.
Okay.
Okay, are you straight on what, and what you think should be brought back?
Okay, yeah, I think so. I have it here that I am going to move the constraints section to the beginning, if even in the table of contents, I'll see how the layout works.
Or add it there
And-
too,
Sorry?
or add it there too, you know, take it out.
And actually put it in the guide
I think
policy.
I'll just relocate it as opposed to duplicate it. And then also to add a subtitle that would better explain to layperson what active design means. And I believe Maureen will send me a list of edits that more so have to do with language and if they were
It's
consistent
just
with the
copy
branding.
edit, it's spelling.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Okay, and that, so that won't affect the content at all. Then in the policy document itself, the policy text, I will also add the constraint section and also who is this policy intended for. And I'm going to spell out what discretionary development approvals means. And I'm going to replace the word addressed with considered. That's my list of changes.
Thank you, those are the amendments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so can we pass it with those amendments, or do you just want to take it back?
I don't know what your feeling on that.
There's no rush, why don't we-
If council's comfortable, I think that staff would follow those exact directions, and I don't know that you really want, unless you want to have another full discussion on it.
Well,
If just to incorporate those changes,
They would probably.
staff have captured them, I think you would be in order to approve them tonight.
Yeah, I'm okay, given the list.
Yeah.
So then the
Do you wanna
motion
read
needs
the
to be
motion?
as amended.
Okay,
As amended.
As a
As
Well, it's just as amended.
Let's ask.
Approve as amended.
Yeah,
Hey, council,
Sorry?
that council adopt the active design guidelines policy 1906 as amended at the December 9th regular council meeting.
Okay, sounds perfect to me.
I,
Yes, it was
Okay.
previously.
Sue Ellen had the
Yeah.
move,
Yeah.
no, Dave has a second, and any further discussion, no, thank you, all in favor?
very good, thank you.
Moved along. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Emma.
Great. Okay, 6.2, Shauna,
No.
Public Art Advisory Committee.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you. Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose to be here this evening is to present the 2020 Public Art Advisory Committee Work Plan for approval and as recommended by the Public Art Advisory Committee, which was struck in early 2019. Part of the terms of reference required to provide a work plan, and this is it. The committee has identified 3 projects. I don't know if you can read that very well. You got it, you're straight. So the committee has identified 3 public art projects that they would like to take on in 2020 as part of their work plan. So one is a community art project, and it would be down on the lock block wall as you drive off the ferry. It is a water silhouette project where they would probably partner with either one of the schools or community recreation, and have some kids would be lined up along the wall, sprayed with water, and then an artist to paint in the silhouettes afterwards. That would be a temporary public art installation. That would be something that might change over time, but we thought it might just be a good introduction to having some public art down there. The public art donation, there's an anonymous donor that has come forward, and I do not have the details of that as of yet. All the details for all of these projects will come later to council as per the public art program and policy procedures. So this is just a guide and overview of the projects that the Public Art Advisory Committee has been talking about. So there is a donation of a large piece of art, and the other piece for 2020 is a public art program, communications and education piece, and what that would look like is probably a print and electronic brochure to highlight existing public art and celebrate public art, focusing on the value it has in the community and how it can create public spaces that provide areas for social connection, and how that benefits the community as a whole.
you'll see the budget there is up to $20,000, and that number comes from the public art policy that had $10,000 per year allotted to the public art reserve, and so $10,000 from 2019 and $10,000 from 2020 is where that budget item comes from. In addition, on the other side, and you have it there on your screens, there was 3 maintenance projects that the PAC identified. One is the Spirit of the Flame sculpture, which is just down at the bottom of the hill here. It needs some TLC, so we're looking at an annual inspection, washing it, and the restoration of the plaque. The plaque is currently really difficult to read. That project is ready to go next week. So that'll be taking place. That was part of the 2019 operating budget. That $2,500 was approved in the 2019 budget process. And then the lock block wall preparation in order for that public art community engagement to happen later in 2020. The wall needs to be cleaned for anything to be able to happen on there. So that is, I know that Scott Massey is taking that on, and he's going to be looking at how to make that happen in the next couple of weeks as well. I did put the 3rd public art maintenance budget request into the budget process for $2,500 for 2020 for the ongoing maintenance and to restore the Spirit Flame sculpture. So initially what will happen is the washing and restoration of the plaque. The sculpture is about 10 years old, and it could use a new varathane recoat and possibly repainting. So those are things that were identified as projects for 2020, assuming the budget is approved for that. I think that kind of sums up the work plan for the Public Art Advisory Committee. And the recommendation would be that council approve the 2020 Public Art Advisory Committee work plan in principle and instruct staff to refer work plan items as presented at the December 9th regular council meeting to the 2020-2024 financial plan process. So that has been done as the financial plan budget has been happening this fall. And just to also reiterate that each of these, the projects, the actual projects would come to council for approval with photos and a detailed plan of what it would entail and who would be involved in the partnerships, and all of that would come for approval as per the procedure documents that were amended to the public art policy about a month ago. I can't remember the date.
So I'd like to move the
Thank you, Sean.
recommendation. So
Okay, so we've got Maureen, go ahead.
I'm just going to move the recommendation that council approve the 2020 Public Art Advisory Committee work plan in principle and instruct staff to refer work plan items as presented to the December 9th, 2019 regular council meeting to the 2020-2024 financial plan process. It's always best when you hear them twice. So,
It's gonna be a tough one. Second, David, thank you. Just, can you go back to the previous slide? So in the public art donation,
Yes.
so.
So the piece of public art my understanding of it is it's an anonymous donor. The piece of
Okay.
public art is going to be donated by the donor.
Yes.
The budget amount attached to it there is for installation requirements, so
Okay.
a base and a substrate, and so that it's sitting on something solid, maybe some remediation around the area if it's needed, coordinating that project and liaison, plus a sign of recognition, as well as insurance and maintenance plan.
But we still have.
Okay, that's good.
But you would still, it would still come to council.
Okay, I just wonder where the 75 of that, but that's obviously, it's obviously some kind of
Something.
sculpture.
Just wait.
I don't actually know.
But it, I thought it could be a painting or something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
I think it's
Any further discussion, anybody? Okay, all in favor? Thank you.
Great,
Unanimous.
thank you.
Great, thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will send around a little video clip that will make more sense of the community art.
Yes,
project.
yeah,
Yeah.
great, thank you, Maureen.
All right, Daniel Martin. Housing agreement. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm here today with a housing agreement bylaw number 496. So this is looking at area 1 of lot 2, so municipality owned land at the foot of the hill opposite the museum and opposite the ferry lineup. So in August, as council I'm sure is aware, in August we announced that we had entered into a purchase sale agreement with DK Harris Properties. And as part of that purchase sale agreement, it included language anticipating the following restrictions regarding the housing that would be proposed on the site. So it specified the building would be used for residential rental housing, and it specified that 15% of the gross floor area of the building would be affordable rental units for a period of not less than 25 years from the date of occupancy. And the affordable rental unit is set in that agreement as 30% of the housing income limits that are determined by BC Housing. So since then, the DK Harris Properties has come forward with a development proposal on the site, which council has seen and issued a variance permit for. And so we accordingly then started drafting, or have drafted, the housing agreement bylaw itself to cement those conditions into the land. So the Local Government Act, for those refresher, Local Government Act outlines a housing agreement. So it says the local government can by bylaw enter into a housing agreement. It may include terms and conditions regarding the occupancy of the housing unit. It may include the form of tenure of it, the availability of who's eligible to rent those, and the rental rates that may be charged. That's what this bylaw sets out to do. So bylaw 496. Interestingly, it's a bylaw. You'll note in the top of it, the agreement, and we are playing both roles in the bylaws. We're the owners of the land, so we're in the agreement as the developer and the municipality, and then the land would then transfer to the developer when the conditions come off the sale. So the bylaw requires all 27 units to be used as rental accommodation. So that's for the life of the building. That they're there, the 27 units. It also stipulates priority of rental of the units be given to tenants who are either residents of Bowen Island, who are employees on Bowen Island, or who were residents of Bowen prior to retirement. So that's for all the units. And then for the affordable units, it says that for a 25-year term, 4 of the units within the building, and it says it can be any 4 at any time, but no more than 2 of them can be studio units at any time, and that fulfills the 15%. But these units be rented to eligible tenants for a maximum permitted rent. So eligible tenant means somebody having a household income set by the housing income levels. So in January 1st, 2020, this would mean for a studio or 1-bedroom, a maximum household income of $51,000, and for a 2-bedroom unit, $63,000. The permitted rent is then set at 1/12 of 30% of the hill. So for a studio or a 1-bedroom, this translates to a rent of $1,275 a month, and accordingly for a 2-bedroom. This is then, the hills gets recalculated annually, so if you're in it, there's requirements in there. If you enter the unit and you're eligible for this, you can then exceed the income level going forward by a set amount. If you exceed it beyond a set amount, then you'd be required to give given notice to make it available for somebody who is eligible at that point. So moving forward, the recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to the housing agreement bylaw. That would allow our timing to then adopt the bylaw at the January 15th meeting, to then register the agreement on the land before the conditions come off at the end of January.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
Maureen, and then Allison?
All right, Allison, do you want to go first?
Well, I just have this vague recollection that we did this before when we had it on the market and thought we had a buyer, but I can't find it listed under the housing agreement bylaw.
What was done before was a covenant on title that said that there will be a housing agreement.
Okay, so we didn't actually go through the terms of it.
It just said that the future development, 15% of that will be. At the time, we didn't know what 15% would be, and so how many units there would be, and all the details in the housing agreement.
So there's no covenant or bylaw we need to rescind or remove? Okay.
Given that you want to do first, second, and third, I'm just going to go through this.
Sure.
Okay. First question was, we've got the term of this agreement mentioned. There's no end term, there's just a start date for the agreement?
So the term is, for those 4 units, there's a 25-year from date of occupancy, but otherwise the agreement just lasts.
Just lasts, okay. 1.01C, you just need an opening quote. J on the next page, there's a word missing. Developer includes and any successor.
So is the "and" to be deleted, so it just developer includes any successor in the title?
Which page you want?
Page five of
17 is the agreement.
Okay, everybody talked at once and I missed
Five,
it.
5 of 17.
5, thank you.
Do you know what the change is there, Donna?
Yeah, I'm just trying to pull up some of the past versions.
What was your first change, Bonnie?
The first change, oh, it's just a quotation.
No, it looks like that was in the original draft.
So we need clarification there, whether it was a missing word or an added word.
Yeah.
You're in 101J, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then K just needs end punctuation. N, this is a substantive question. Demonstrate to the satisfaction of the developer that he or she has secured full-time permanent employment. We know so many people who patch together 1, 2, 3 jobs, and some of those people may very well be very good candidates for the smaller suites. So I'm wondering if we could say secured full-time or equivalent, or something like that. There needs to be something in there to cover the 3-job person.
Yes.
Yeah.
So pop in
Yeah,
equivalent?
or, I mean, that seems, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then on the next page, S, about resident, it says that they can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the developer that their current permanent residence has been in the blah blah. I think it should say that they have been permanent residents, because it's the resident, not the residents that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Did this get legal review already?
This got, our legal review. Yes, and so our lawyer did review it at the end of the period as well as throughout.
And then on page 7, 3.02A, I think it's great, you've got the no application to stratify. And in 3.03B, as determined by the developer and the tenant. Market rent as determined by the developer and the tenant. What's the tenant's role there?
I think that is, they enter into the tenancy agreement.
Okay. And this point C makes sure that we're not looking at short-term rentals here.
Yeah.
3.04B, an eligible tenant. Sorry to be pedantic
No.
here, but just,
Yeah.
we need to do this if we're going to go
Sorry,
through.
the and, yeah.
Yeah. Page 10 of 17, point 5, intentionally deleted.
So that was, I think that was a clause that was in another housing agreement, so it was never included, and then they've gone at some point intentionally deleted rather than renumber all the subsequent clauses.
I see, so
It
that
just
there's
got put-
continuity
oh, yeah.
between the
Yeah,
two.
so we didn't have to rejig the whole format.
Let's you compare things.
Yeah, okay. I think that's pretty much it. The rest of this did not seem particularly Bowen-y. Yeah, that's it, thank you.
Yes.
I'm looking at page 102. Sorry, I'll go the other way here. Page 13 of 17.
Okay.
8.11. Every obligation of a party which is set out in this agreement will extend throughout the term. And then at the top on page, sorry, I'm getting a different page number here.
Clause
It's page
numbers help.
5. Oops, 6 I mean.
Are you on page 6 of
And
the
W.
agreement?
W, I'm on page 6 of 17W. Term means the terms of this agreement being the useful life of the building that contains the units, including the affordable housing units. And I just didn't see the 25 years there. Does it need to be
Yeah, the
reflected?
25 isn't there. The 25-year term is the affordable housing term on page 4. That's where it says for the 4 units, it's a period of 25 years. So the affordable housing term is a different defined term than just term.
Oh, see now, that might lead to some confusion, so I don't, maybe under W there, if you wrote not to be confused with the affordable housing term or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just, I missed it because I was looking down below it
Yeah.
for that wording, and I saw somewhere where you said even if it burns down, they have to put those 4 back.
There's something about, if it's demolished, it's like they can't demolish it and be like, oh, now we don't have to do affordable housing.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
25 years.
Right.
And term is different.
And I think it just referred to term there, not, maybe it did afford, anyway, I had some confusion about that, you may just want to check.
But you have defined the term.
There's 2 terms.
There's 2, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
So they both, they both have definitions to this.
Okay.
That's my question.
Anybody else? All right.
4.02 is the one on demolish.
That's it, yeah.
Fix up, but they've got to be rebuilt.
So I'm happy to move it here.
Okay, go ahead.
The bylaw number 49, I'm sure I'm on the right one here. No, I'm on the wrong one. The bylaw number 496, 2019, cited as Area 1 of Block 2, Housing Agreement Authorization Bylaw number 496, 2019, be read a first, second, and third time.
As amended.
As amended, yeah.
I'll second.
Second, Michael. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. Passed unanimously. Daniel Martin. Once again. Land use bylaw and official community plan amendment.
So next I have an application to amend the land use bylaw and the official community plan associated with the property at 720 Gardner Lane. So that's located in the middle of the island. This is Gardner Lane, it's right where Adams Road splits off, and the far end is on Buchanan Road as well. And so just a refresher, so this did come before you in September, but we have a refresher in the official community plan. The land is designated as rural residential, and in the land use bylaw, it is rural residential and a split of rural residential 2 and 3. So both zones allow for dwelling with agricultural, horticulture, stable and cattle uses. So what is proposed is the applicant has proposed to rezone a 4-hectare portion of the property to be rural commercial 2 to allow for a retreat center. And as part of the application, they were leaving the remainder of the RR3 unchanged to permit future subdivision to create 2 lots in the RR3 zone. So this came before you in September 30th. At that point, you referred the application out to committees, and you directed staff to prepare a bylaw, or prepare bylaws to amend land use bylaw and official community plan. So since then, staff have done a round to the committees. So the APC recommended proceed with the rezoning application, and they had comments regarding staff accommodation clause and parking requirements. The Economic Development Committee recommended council proceed with the rezoning application, and they wanted to specifically provide comment that the business proposed to the retreat center aligns with their priority of promoting year-round destination tourism, particularly ecotourism, health and wellness as growth industries on Bowen Island. And finally, the Parks and Trails, so they discussed it at a meeting, they did a site visit, and they met again at the end of November and made a motion, so they recommended council proceed. And they specifically were looking for protection on the Bowen riparian corridor. And then they were particularly interested in South Park potential on land on the west side of the property through the mature forest on that side that would allow connection from Buchanan Road to the Crown Land. And they recommend staff further investigate the environmentally sensitive forested areas before final determination. So when we had originally gone, we'd been looking at potential parkland out to the Bowen Brokenshire corridor, and they looked and they thought that that was not appropriate, and that the forest land was a more appropriate location. So some staff comments in the EPC comment on staff accommodation. So currently the retreat center zone or definition just says it allows staff accommodation. So the APC were a little worried that this was an open-ended process, that there could just be staff accommodation and something that could be exploited in the future, where you know staff will work there 2 hours a week and they can stay and expand in size. So, and the APC had noted similar retreat center zoning in Squamish Lillooet Regional District, where it limits staff accommodation based on the number of guest rooms, and so it has 1 dwelling unit per 10 guest rooms. So this retreat center zoning allows up to 40 guest rooms, and so it would allow for staff accommodation, which I thought was like an appropriate ratio. And then finally, so this is just a collection of 2 of the OCP maps. So this is the Parks and Trails map in the OCP showing the property here, and then over here is the environmentally sensitive area map. And so this is what the Parks and Trails was looking at in terms of this green area, showing the mature forest ecosystem, and saying that's what they wanted to focus the protection on as land dedication. So based on that, and in talking with the applicant, staff had come up with this sort of land allocation in terms of 4-hectare parcel for the retreat center zoning, which basically follows a ridge line across the property. So there's very clearly a lower part of the property and an upper part of the property, and this would divide those two. It would then leave, it would put about a hectare of land, or that's my math, it's about 2.5 acres of land into a park land, and leave the remainder in this RR3 and place it in an RR3C, so it would still allow to be divided into 2 lots. Essentially, the applicant saw potential for 2-lot subdivision. There would be smaller lots with a park dedication.
Park dedication, is that?
With a park dedication, yes. So this would be the park dedication. So the OCP bylaw that's before you is number 489, and it's fairly simple. It would just redesignate those 2 portions of the land. So this portion into the park land and this portion into the retreat commercial land designation. And then bylaw 490 would place this portion as a passive park, this portion into that rural residential 3C, the zone variation that allows a slightly smaller lot size, and this C into the retreat center zoning. So this is in the bylaw 490 would again place the RR2 into the retreat center zone. It would amend that retreat center zone to include a regulation on the amount of staff accommodation, as I discussed, and a definition for staff accommodation. It would place the RR3 zone into the passive park portion of it, and a park portion into this RR3C zone variation. And so the recommendation is to give these 2 readings, these 2 bylaws, each a first reading, and to refer them to the APC to comment specifically on partly the parkland dedication, partly what we've done with the retreat center zoning, and to the Parks and Trails Greenways Advisory Committee for comment on the park dedication, and we may refine the park boundaries through that process, and to the Islands Trust for review of these bylaws. And then we also recommend council advise the applicant to host a open house prior to consideration of a second reading of the bylaw.
Sorry, did you say open house?
Yeah, or a public.
Oh, right, okay, thank you.
It's pretty complete.
All right, questions? Go ahead, Secretary.
So,
Rob.
Daniel, right now, as it stands with the zoning, how many what can they do with the land right now?
They could do 3 lots, so they could divide it into 3.
3 houses, basically.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it's gonna go to 2 houses,
Yeah.
plus a retreat center,
Yeah.
which potentially could have how many?
40 guest rooms.
40
Not houses, rooms.
rooms.
Yeah.
So it could be one building, it's not gonna be
It
multiple.
can be multiple buildings.
Can
So
be
already
multiple.
there are, I think there are 5 guest rooms as a bed and breakfast. So it would be multiple guest cabins, or it could be in one larger one. It sort of is open to either configuration.
Right, so that's a significant upsell, and basically we're going from 4 houses to 2 plus however 40 potential units.
Allison?
So just clarifying that the 40 in-residence guests in a single building or cabins, but those cabins are just gonna be bed and 2 bathrooms?
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
cooking, because there's one shared kitchen. So is it clear in the bylaw that what's the definition of a cabin, I guess? somebody couldn't expand the cabin and make it into more.
It would definitely be that they could not be a dwelling unit, so it couldn't contain all of those functions. So like, you couldn't have a kitchen, living area, sleeping area.
And the land use bylaws that's working right now would pick that up, not the amendments that are in here.
Yes, because it's just, that it couldn't raise the level of a dwelling unit.
One shared kitchen and meeting areas, bathrooms, staff accommodation, one resident, the manager, and one for owner and an accessory. So the other question is in the 2.2, what is RC1?
RC1, I believe, is the building center. So it's rural commercial, and then 2 is in brackets.
I was trying to figure why there was
Yeah.
0 guest bedrooms.
Yeah.
So why, so what's Xenia then? Why wouldn't it have the same?
Xenia is the other RC2 property.
Okay, so it is RC2, so it wasn't the 2.
Yeah, and so I did flag that the other piece. I did flag in there, you need to communicate with Xenia in particular. We're making changes to the RC2.
Yeah, so that was my other
Yeah.
question. That the changes are okay with it.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that's something that I will be doing, is to, confirm.
Could I say the map again?
Yeah.
I just am not quite sure how the park dedication relates to the existing Buchanan Park. Where is it?
Sure, so Mike's Lord Park is this one that comes through here, like that, do you mean that park? Or do you mean?
I just always call it Buchanan Park. It probably is the proper name. So I guess the question I have is, are we creating a larger chunk of contiguous parkland? Or are we ending up with 2 pieces of parkland in that general vicinity?
Yeah, I mean, it is 2, so like, as the Parks Trails Committee, we essentially walked up this way and across and came down to join this trail to come across with the goal of, seeing what kind of loop potential there was. So I mean, they don't connect, but they're sort of a short distance away.
There's a possibility of connection.
Yeah, I mean, so the original offer from the applicant was to go this way with the trail, and Parks Trails moved up, like this is quite steep down, and then over a riparian area, and then up, and then this becomes private land. So there's sort of potential down the road, maybe these people will develop.
Can you put the map that's figure 2 back up there? Have you got that one?
Do you mean, I'm not sure which one.
Well, figure 2 is in our package on, it's the OCP map, but it shows Buchanan Road and the trail.
Right.
I didn't realize there were trails through that green one that sort of runs behind the
Yeah,
forest.
Mike's Lord or whatever.
Yeah.
This one, yeah, so, that is an existing trail, this one through
Yeah.
here.
So
So it connects to that road.
it
Yeah.
connects with Buchanan Road.
Then if people go up to the top of the Buchanan Road, they could
Go
get
back
up
in.
through this new
There is
park.
gonna be a trail.
Because right now, there's an empty road right away, but there's not
Yeah.
a trail. They could go up through this new park or the empty road right away in a straight line if anybody ever wanted to do that. Then they could connect to Crown and they could get onto other trails.
Yeah.
So they would have a possibility of not just the Mike's Lord loop and at some point in the future, but other trail connections.
So is this trail actually built?
That's, well, so our maps don't show that because it's across private property,
Yeah,
but
so-
in essence, that's the cross.
So as part of the condition of the development, is this trail gonna be built to proper trail standards?
So that's not on the rezoning property, but that's on the.
Oh, I mean,
North of it,
property,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It's the one with the 5 little dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is 720.
Yeah.
So this would just take us from the bottom of Buchanan Road up through a park area to connect with that bottom corner of Crown. And then you could go,
So on the ground, it doesn't actually change anything as far as the trail is concerned? It just makes it legal?
Official, yeah.
it would give it a park to go through.
So this connection, right, we have a slim road right of way, but I wouldn't say it's not passable at the moment. So it's possible to essentially trespass the trail over to get here, but there's not actually a trail there when you go. So this connection point would be new.
Okay, thank you.
Can I see that other map back for a sec? Just the,
This one?
now that RC3, the R3C,
Yeah.
are these actually defined as separate pieces of property now?
Right now, it's all one.
No, but
property.
if we approve this,
Yeah,
is that a separate piece of property? Can he sell that? Can he sell that?
if he subdivided.
Oh, yes, it's subdivided, go through the process, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you go back to the other one?
Yeah, actually, maybe
Rob?
keep that one there for
Yeah.
the time being, Daniel.
Alright.
So in negotiations for that parkland, and I don't know if there's any buildable area out there, I don't know what that looks like, I assume it's probably not very well buildable. I guess from my perspective, I wanna make sure that if we're upzoning a property, which we definitely are substantially, that we're getting enough community benefit return for it. So why that's small or whatever, why that, why not more, what would negotiations look like, or what are you thinking? For example?
So after the Parks and Trails recommendation, I had some back and forth with the applicant, and I did start larger. And then we sort of had ended up at this point, but we are looking for council feedback and from the Parks Committee feedback. So if council looks at this and says, I thought we were gonna get more, I don't know if I'm happy with this, I would take that to the applicant and say, okay, we gotta look at it again. And to some extent, I think with the Parks and Trails, we'd really look to do another site visit and try to map out where we are on the ground and see, because some of it is, this area is essentially a higher area, as is down in here. And there's like a trail route that would connect nicely between them, and so we want to sort of make sure that we have a route that is within the parkland that would be usable. So we would need to refine that, but the feedback I hear from council is that, you know, given the rezoning, you expect to see more, then I would look for that feedback and I can bring that to the applicant.
Well, I'm certainly in favor of going along that route.
Can you put the other map back up? Now, you said, okay, just to orient myself. This is Dennis Pit?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Buchanan Road basically ends here.
Yeah.
And you gotta come in that corner into the.
But
And there is no existing trail now, is there?
No, but so there is, Allison, we do have a road right of way that continues
On
to
paper.
the crown on
Okay, but it's
paper.
not on this property. I guess what I was getting at is if this is the forest bit
Correct.
Yeah,
and we can't go through there, could we have a trail that would go here and along here and then hook into that?
so that's still a future trail, and that's still across the private, like that's still not a trail.
Oh, so that's not a road right away?
No,
Oh, I thought maybe this was a continuation of
no.
that road.
So our connection point to the crown is right, like at the
Right that
corner,
corner.
essentially, to come out this way, and that's where the crosswalk
Okay,
trail.
so are you suggesting maybe we could have a trail that would go through here
Yeah,
and do that?
Exactly.
So that's not anywhere in any of the sketches or?
It just says park right now, it doesn't say.
Yeah,
Yeah, trails.
so if
Yeah,
there's
'cause
to
it'll
be
be
a
inside
trail, I
the
would
park.
want to have that built as part of the,
Okay.
rezoning.
Also,
Yeah.
if you look at it through a future framework of conservation development,
Right.
does this fit the bill? And 1.1 hectares doesn't cut it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
We go back, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what I was expecting was more if we switch back to the OCP map that shows the environmentally sensitive areas. It's the green one over on the left.
Yeah.
I expected the sort of the park area, designated park area, to be more kind of along that line somehow. Because that's the older forest, the older forest.
Yeah, I would say that would be more in line with the way I was thinking too.
Yeah.
And is there a protection strip along Bowen Brook?
So then what the Parks and Trails had asked for is that be essentially a covenanted area
Along Bowen Brook, yeah.
along Bowen riparian, yeah.
Protection,
Yeah.
conservation.
Okay.
Is there a riparian area in there?
It is a riparian area.
And those are obviously all outside the riparian area.
So they have done some work in there that has, like, they've received environmental and they're outside the riparian area, but the creek itself is riparian.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
So Daniel, just process-wise, so hearing that,
Yeah.
can we move forward with this, with you being able to, or does that now need to be negotiated first?
I mean, council can either go forward with the bylaws as drafted at first reading, but with either expectation or some direction to say, but don't bring back the same bylaw maps, or council can say, or can refer these back to staff. So it depends if you want, like, if you're okay going forward, say we've given your feedback and expect to see something different at second reading, then you do it and we can do the referrals to committees and stuff. And
I would like to see something for the parkland that more follows the environmentally sensitive areas. I would like to see something along those lines.
Yeah. But we could give it
Because
first.
you're right,
read,
where
yes.
it's a
Send
huge,
it back out.
a huge gift here, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I have a different question. Here you guys all are talking about parks and trails, and I support this, by the way. My question is about parking. How much, I've got myself mixed up between the other one here. How much parking is in here? Because I was looking at the parking policy, or the policy 193 in the OCP, which says businesses like retreats, if they are encouraged to pick up their guests and bring them up to discourage extra car traffic on the roads and parking. And so I couldn't find it quickly, I just thought you might know.
it's probably one per guest room.
Yeah, see, that seems really high to me.
That's 40 parking spots.
Yeah,
Staff
that's-
review the APC recommendation,
Yeah.
staff review the parking requirements.
So that's not kept, the APC, we're concerned that there be sufficient parking on site.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm concerned with policy 193 in the official community plan. It's on page 59. And it, it's one of those encouraged policies. But then there's objectives, 182 and 185 and 186, that are all about retreats are good for the island, they're good fit, economic health of the island, that kind of thing. But that one policy is just, because then you'd have that whole bunch of people coming for the start of the same course, and parking and taking up spaces on the ferry and all that, when we're actually in a time of climate action. We've passed our emergency declaration, and our official community plan already recommends that resort or retreat owners reduce the use of vehicles. So I would ask that that be addressed.
I'd support that.
I would also
Right.
like to see, not in any great detail, but just a sense of where they are anticipating putting the buildings, in this.
They don't come in the building permit process.
Should we be doing a site visit?
But not, it doesn't have to be super detailed, but just, are they putting all the buildings up at the top, are they thinking, or?
And I know, so I mean, there's buildings that are there now, I wonder what's here. So essentially it's like building is down in here with buildings around. And I had talked to him, he had been trying to get like development plan showing, okay, what would more full build out look like? But he wasn't able to do it in time for this council report, but I believe it's looking more along the ridge than like a next round of cabins would be higher up. But yes, we can make sure to bring that when this comes back to council. And Allison, if council wants a site visit, we can arrange a site visit in the new year.
And I guess the other, just looking at all the forest calendar, is addressing fire smart principles in the whole thing, because there's only one way in and one way out, and up a hill.
Yeah.
Can't do both. Okay, so we gotta get this wrapped somehow. Does council want to do a resolution on that, reducing the size of that RR2 lot there to something that's closer aligned to the environmentally sensitive area?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
Is that just a recommendation to staff? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing right now. Yeah.
Is that what you need?
So I guess that's the question is, so if council wants to proceed with the recommendation for first reading with the referrals to committees and then give direction to staff on it in addition, or do you want to not proceed with the bylaws and give direction to staff for us to bring back the bylaws for first reading?
Maybe we should do it.
I think that would be better, because if you can't sort things out with the applicant, then you've wasted all those committees' time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they've all looked at it already.
Yeah.
So could we say that bylaw 498, 2019 cited as, all these sightings, be referred back to staff for amendments as discussed?
As discussed for council recommendations.
I'll second
Can I
that.
get specific language about?
Yeah, that the park, the lands dedicated as park, be more closely aligned to the environmentally sensitive areas identified in the OCP.
I would say aligned,
Yeah, okay, well, aligned,
Aligned.
yeah.
not
okay.
more
Not
closely.
more closely, aligned, thanks, Gary.
That a potential larger park dedication
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
considered,
Yeah,
And trail construction,
that trail construction be
connection.
required as part of the rezoning.
And that parking requirements
Be addressed.
be addressed as per policy 193 in the OCP.
Or be reviewed.
be reviewed as part of
Be considered.
Considered.
Yeah. Fun with words tonight. Was there anything else on that that?
Is the
could we-
Bowen Brook covenant in the package or not?
We took council direction for that as well.
And covenant protection for Bowen Brook
Be included.
included.
Sorry, what was the last part?
Covenant protection for Bowen Brook.
The-
Well, that should be in there.
And that a general layout, what would you call it? Just to show the buildings, proposed buildings.
General site plan of development.
Or more detail on the proposed site plan.
But
Be brought forward.
do we really care as long as it fits into the building
I don't know if it really see it.
code?
Because it's a bit too
Might be-
prescriptive.
Yeah, we get
Yeah.
into
This
too much
is a
detail.
low impact retreat type development. This is not a full on whiz-bang hotel. So I really encourage Daniel to have as much conversation as possible. I think go forward is quite clear. And I'd be very interested because let's be careful when we think of the nature of this business. It's a retreat, right? It's a rural, a rustic type of development. You know, if we load this up and treat it like someone's putting a Ritz-Carlton here, you know, we may be doing ourselves a disservice. And that's not the case, and I don't think that's the intent, and I'd be interested after conversations when Daniel comes back. So I kind of like to leave it for more general conversations, bearing in mind everything that we've said, being a little less prescriptive.
All right, anything to add, Simone, or I'll get.
Just that,
most of
that I agree with trustee Gale, because I think all of these amendments, these potential amendments are compatible or could be compatible with what I imagine a Bowen retreat to be, as it's described in the official community plan and from what I've read in the report. So it all might be quite compatible.
Yeah, we're not gonna take
And,
anything away from the retreat.
well, people want to have trails to walk on and things, and
Yeah.
it depends
Oh, yeah,
on,
yeah,
it depends on
absolutely.
the,
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the business, and I'm not knowing.
All we're
those, but
doing
it-
is trying to
It
say.
may all add, as Bowen's nature and outdoors have been described as a business asset.
All we're doing
Studies
is
from-
creating more parking, all we're doing. Maureen?
I think it's just useful. Daniel asked for direction. Those are all the points that we
Yeah.
already discussed.
We want to explore with the applicant.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, that's great.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes, can you read what you've got?
The council directs staff to amend bylaw number 498 and 499, back to staff to reflect the following amendments. Lands dedicated as park be aligned to environmentally sensitive areas in the OCP. Potential larger park dedication be considered. Trail construction be required as part of rezoning. Parking requirements be considered for OCP policy 193. Covenant protection for Bowen Brook be included, and general site plan of proposed development. I'll work on the wording.
I don't think you have to put more parkland in there, because by expanding that parkland into the thing, I think it's kind of a double.
Okay, gotcha.
That's all.
And I thought you were gonna take the site
With the
plan.
developer in the beginning part, that staff
Sorry, what
be
was that?
requested to, yeah.
The piece where you said reflect the following amendments should simply read explore with the developer and then the various points, because they're not actually amendments to anything.
Explore the following with the developer,
Right.
yeah.
In fact, it might, I want to say draft bylaw.
Draft is in there.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I just
go
got
ahead.
a comment because we've been talking a lot about conservation development, and the whole idea there is, especially in forested areas, like this is totally untouched outside of the cove, so not where we want a lot of heavy development. The idea is that we, you know, shrink the footprint, especially and when we have the opportunity. This is an opportunity, obviously, because we wanted to upzone. So, but we also need to make sure that we are getting enough land dedicated to do that. So, I mean, and that's what I think sort of the spirit of what we're trying to do here.
Have you got that aerial again, Martin? There, yeah. Because you can see the heavily forested areas, which is way up here.
That's,
So as much
Well,
as-
he's put a color tone.
Oh,
Yeah, some of that is the
Color code.
Yeah.
anyway, let's leave it at that.
Okay,
So I'll move that.
I'll second that.
Okay, no further discussion on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Oh, Dan, you're back in again. What?
no.
Okay, so then, final appearance tonight, I have a development variance permit for introduction at 1118 Miller Road. And so this is the Snug Cove House lot in their subdivision, so lot 13 in their subdivision, located on Miller Road, just down from the Four Corners location. This is in area 2 of CD 15 in terms of zoning, and the zoning so permits up to 24 units of supportive housing. There's a maximum lot coverage of 55% on the property, a maximum height of, in the zoning says the lesser of 14 meters or 3 stories. And it has setbacks of 4 meters from the front lot line and 3 meters from the side and the rear lot lines. So Snug Cove House has put together a proposal for a building that would have 22 one-bedroom units of supportive housing, along with various amenities to support the supportive housing. So it has a kitchen and staff support space and laundry rooms and dining areas and lounge for the residents. Let's see, so 22 one-bedroom units. It's about 26,000 square feet in floor area, and it has about 9,000 square feet in lot coverage in total. Okay, so just as we look from the side, so it's largest on Miller, it fronts Miller, and then the building essentially steps up as it gets towards the Bowen Court Seniors Co-op. So it's a 2-story building at the back and a 4-story building at the front, with underground parking and underground waste and recycle areas underneath as well. So this is it viewing from Miller. So this is where it's the full 4 stories with the underground parkade entrance here, and then the building entrance on the side into a lobby reception area with elevators to take you up to the higher levels. The dining area is on the top floor, so with the maximum view and maximum light is where the dining and the lounge areas are. So then this is the general site plan. You can't read this, but this is them trying to show the various setback lines within it and where they're looking for a variance. So you can see we've got all these different colored lines as things kind of poke out a little bit from where the various setback lines are. So the most significant variance that they're asking for is to increase the maximum lot coverage. So the maximum in the zone is at 55%, and they're requesting to go up to 65%, so a larger footprint on the building to facilitate the building program. So despite the fact that they are not maxing out their maximum number of units, given the overall uses of the building, they need a larger building and footprint than in the zone. They're also looking for a variance to the height regulations. So they are below the 14-meter height limit that is there, but they are higher than the 3 stories. They've got a partial 4th story that is on the ground. It's an underground parkade as well as the entrance in the lobby reception area. They are going into the side setback on the north side of the property for the underground parkade. So it's entirely underground with an above ground door entrance to the parkade, but it goes into that setback. And then there's a couple things where they go, again, they extend further than they're permitted to into the setback. So the roof overhangs on the gable roof. So when they gable like this, they're over the decks of the units. So the decks can go 1.25 meters into the setbacks, and then our zoning, the roofs can only go 0.9 meters. So they're requesting those extend as well to 1.25 meters to fully cover the decks or the balconies. And then in the side and setbacks and in the front, they have what they're called architectural features that extend into the setbacks 0.6 meters. So we allow some things like bay windows, and we allow chimneys to go that 0.6 meters into the setbacks, but what they have essentially are columns to break up the side of the building, and the elevator shaft, which is made to look like a chimney, but again, goes that 0.6 meters into the setback and goes all the way up.
Are they reversed? They're requesting?
Oh, these ones are confusing because, so this is the roof overhang, we permit up to 1.9 meters, and they're requesting it goes 1.25 meters into it.
Right.
Whereas these other ones, we require a 3 meter, and they're requesting it to go down to 2.4
I see.
meters.
Okay.
So this one is the one that's confusing because it's about allowing a further extension into it as opposed to a smaller.
That's to accommodate the architecture, right?
Yeah. Those last two are sort of allow the columns and the arches and
I can
stuff
see
like
it,
that.
you can see it here.
Yeah.
Are the roof overhangs extending out past the balcony?
No, just.
No, so they're
So
going,
why are the balconies needing a variance?
so the
They're
decks can go 1.25 meters into
Oh.
the setback, and the roofs can only go 0.9 into the setback. So you see them here with the deck and the roof.
Yeah, well, it makes infinite sense to cover the whole
Yeah.
balcony.
Yeah, so the recommendation is that the council receive this and give permission to issue notice to neighbors and consider it.
Which end is the dining room going to be on?
Right up in here.
Looking
So
out.
looking out over Miller.
Rather than being
Yeah,
directly adjacent to Bowen Court, so easily used for those people.
no, so yeah, it is at the other end. There is an entrance at this, so if you look right in here, you can kind of see there's like essentially a little bridge
Yeah,
to connect
yeah.
the pathway and the straight door, so it will be a straight entrance from this level to come in, to come across to the dining
Presumably,
level.
it's not going to be a wide open the door and walk through.
I
From
don't
a
know
security
that-
perspective.
Yeah.
A hallway there.
But I know throughout the Stone Cove, throughout their sort of planning their program of the building, they've envisioned that the dining options and the meal options to be available for Bowen
Yeah.
Court as well, just for even their economics of scale makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I like that they've got underground parking.
Yeah.
First in the boat.
Thank you for the segue.
Yeah.
I noticed parking is one of those things they need a variance on. How much parking are they asking for?
So they don't need a variance for the parking itself, they require 13 spaces and they are providing that number. What they need a variance for is the underground parkade itself extends into the setback.
That's
It's
to
not
get the.
But it's underground.
It's underground.
Why do they need, I'm just wondering why they need 13 and not fewer?
Yeah, they need 0.6 per
unit.
unit.
Because my feeling is, well, I guess my question is, this is walkable village, we've passed our climate emergency, all the stuff I just said. But also, if these are seniors in assisted living, I think many of them might not have a vehicle. And I wouldn't want to, and, you know, the variance or force the charity to create parking spaces for them, why not leave them?
So I did, when I met with them and they presented, the first time I'd seen it, and they presented the whole thing and went through the variances that they were going to be applying for, we did discuss parking. And in particular, I was going to say, well, if you're applying for a variance anyways, do you need the large, underground parkade area? And at the time, we were also trying to explore, can they reduce their lot coverage and what would that result in? And so after that meeting, they actually thought they were going to take out, like, at least the N2 parking spaces and come back with 11 parking spaces underneath. But they didn't, and partly I think they felt that that was part of almost like the attraction of the building, or to attract people to come in to stay, was the availability of parking, whether or not it's used, but it's people feel like, I'm gonna stay here, people can come visit me, and I'm not gonna
Well,
be
it's
isolated.
I have a
And it's sort
visitor
of-
spot.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
more visitor spot.
All right, thank you very much, that answers my question.
And it could be storage too.
Yes,
They don't have a lot of storage.
Can I read the,
Yeah. Yes,
can I read
please.
the recommendation?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay, good. So, recommendation that notice be given that council will consider the issuance of development variance permit DVP 15/2019 for variance of regulation to be varied for 1118 Miller Road, legally described as lot 13, District Lot 490, Group 1, New Westminster, District Plan EPP 77831, PID 030526931 at the January 15th, 2020 meeting of council. And that council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of development variance permit DVP 15/2019 in accordance with section 499 of the Local Governments Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 1118 Miller Road, legally described as Lot 13, District Lot 490, Group 1, New Westminster, District Plan, EPP 77831, PID 030526931.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? I think these guys have been at it for a pretty long time, and I think there's nothing here that's gonna hurt anybody.
Yep.
I think that this is what they need to get.
Okay, let's vote.
Yeah.
Oh,
This has been.
All in favor? Good.
I just want to say very happy to see you.
Thank you.
This
Well,
has been a long time coming.
Sophie, your turn. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thanks for having me. So I'm here tonight to present the Island Survey 2019 results. And I trust you've all read the 91 pages of the report, but I'm going to go over it with you.
Page by page.
Sorry?
Page by page.
Yes, every single page is redone. So just this presentation, I'm just going to go through the background of the Island Survey 2019, give you details about the survey, how we communicated it, a brief summary of the results. I'm not going to go into all of the data, which is in your report, but I will go over some of the satisfaction questions and compare 2018 information. And then I'm going to go into some notable changes between last time we did the survey and this time, and a few notable results from the local economy section, which is new this year. Okay, so the background is we did Island Survey 2018, which was actually conducted late 2017, but we called it Island Survey 2018 because we were using it to inform the strategic plan for that year. And then in November 2018, Council resolved to develop Island Survey 2019, and the way we gathered that input was from departmental staff, council members, and a communications working group. So we basically looked at the questions from 2018, added a few new questions, just based on our need for the community economic development plan, a housing needs survey, and we revised a few questions as well. So about the survey, there were 51 questions in 7 sections, as you can see there. It took about 15 minutes to complete online. Oh, sorry, just going back, the sections were quality of island life, which is just kind of overall assessment of Bowen life, about your household, which is demographic information, vehicle services, transportation, emergency preparedness, housing, and local economy, which is new. And respondents were asked not to include any identifying personal information, so anything you see in the survey is anonymous. We've redacted all names, business names, and other things that are identifying. So communication, how we communicated, it was open from September 6th to October 11th, so about 5 weeks. This is slightly longer than last time we did the survey. I think the first survey was open for about 3 weeks. It was available online in a paper format. We received a total of 3 paper surveys. And it was advertised through our website, the Undercurrent, a mail drop to all Bowen Island households, a weekly e-newsletter, and social media. And that's one of our fun little graphics we used. So the results, we had slightly fewer results than Island Survey 2018, which was interesting because it was open for longer. So that's just something to look at for next time, just doing maybe more promotion. 18% of Bowen Island's adult population, based on census data, responded to the survey. So there are 523 total responses, and an 88% completion rate. In our satisfaction questions, we did a weighted average calculation. So you can see there, if you selected 1, you were very dissatisfied. If you selected 5, you were very satisfied. If you selected no opinion, don't know, those responses were not factored into our weighted average, just so that we could know, people's actual opinions. So here's a brief overview of the satisfaction questions. So a lot of really similar results this year compared to last year. In terms of overall quality of island life, we're basically slightly lower in most areas. A small uptick in a place to retire and a place to operate a business. but otherwise very, very similar to 2018. And you can see, if this is hard for you to read, you can see in your report, it's all there. Municipal services are all, again, very similar to 2018, ranging from the neutral category to just above satisfied. Again, very similar. Municipal services, so those are community planning services, again, all very similar to 2018. We asked about the climate action program this year just to get a sense of if people know very much about it, and I think that the results indicate that people don't know very much about it, so that's something that we need to maybe educate the public a little bit more on. This is municipal services, public works, again, all very similar, with a few little upticks in satisfaction, especially in snow and ice clearing. But as you recall, the winter of 2017 was really bad for snow and ice, so yeah, that could be that.
That's true.
Yeah. And then we asked about municipal park and trail maintenance this year, which we did not do in 2018, and that people are generally quite satisfied. Snow coat parking, very, very similar to 2018, ranging in the almost neutral satisfaction zone. Community recreation, it's a new question in 2019. We asked it this year. We did not ask it in 2018 because the recreation department does their own annual survey. But that's targeted specifically to recreation users, so people who've signed up for programs. So we decided to add it into this year just to maybe catch people who maybe don't know about or don't use recreation services. And yeah, so that's all new. And transportation, all very similar. Interesting uptake in pedestrian safety. That's increased this year in our respondents, as well as ferry marshalling. Transportation off the island is very similar to 2018 as well, ranging in the neutral to satisfied range. So this is housing. I'll go over this a little bit later in the notable changes, but this was one area that actually changed a little bit visibly. You can see, and it continues on this slide here. There's a slight decrease in the level of importance people consider these issues, and a slight increase in level of satisfaction compared to 2018.
So I just have to ask a question, because when I read this, the importance of, I struggled with what that meant, because it was the exact question, how satisfied with you, is it whether I think this is important, or do I think the municipality is considering it important? That's what I wasn't sure.
Yes, so it's personal feelings. So how important do you consider diverse housing types to be?
Rather
and then how
than-
satisfied are you
Okay, got it.
with this on the island? So I guess it's a little hard. The importance ones, the weighted average, it would be, 1 would be very unimportant, and 5 would be very important.
Right, yeah.
I think that's a big change.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to understand why those two, why it's less important.
No, it's more important to have affordable housing in the blues this year, right?
I know.
Green is
Blue's
this
last
year.
year. The top one is last year.
Last year.
I don't know what colour it is, but the
Yeah.
top one is last year.
Blue is 2018,
Oh,
green
I
is
thought you
2019.
took
Yeah.
I would have put the third.
So sorry, I guess no, they are the same. Is it, okay, it's not quite as important. Affordable housing isn't quite as important to me as it used to be, so even with no change, the municipality is doing a better job.
Yeah.
I guess that's what that means.
And a slight uptick in satisfaction with the same.
That's what I need to know.
Yeah.
Well, there have been a few affordable housing sort of.
Sure.
It's pretty close, those might just be a couple of people.
I wouldn't read.
Too much.
No, but these were time to
I
change.
don't think it's mostly garage.
I don't think they are tiny changes. Look at that.
It's 2.42% of 600 people, so that's 10 or 12 people, that's not a big change.
Those aren't
Those are
percentages.
percentages. They're from 1 to 5.
Yeah, okay, but it's still.
What I
the weighted
noticed
average.
what I noticed when Sophie presented this at a manager's meeting was that the people responding to this, the majority of them were people who either own their homes. So they're not capturing many renters. So I don't know how relative that data is.
Yeah, true.
Just because the people responding, like I responded, but I own my home, so it's affordable housing really isn't all that important to me. So that might be just a thought.
Yeah.
But that would have been the same situation the last time.
Right,
So you'll see the stats on it.
okay.
So here, we have the local economy. People are feeling neutral about the local economy and almost satisfied.
Okay, I see how that
So this slide is not very easy to read, but I'm just demonstrating in your report, if you want to go through the data questions, the highest numbers in each area are bolded and larger typeface. So you can go through all the demographic information, and there are 58 pages of comments. So that'll give you some nice light reading.
Yeah, own and live in my home is the tone limit.
Yes.
Well, and down at the Q5 rent, 2018 was 17.7%, and this year was 13.25%. So fewer renters responded.
and more own and live in my home.
Right.
So that's.
So on to notable changes. FireSmart, obviously there's been a huge increase in people's awareness of the FireSmart program, probably due to our excellent FireSmart program administered by our emergency program coordinator and all the public education that we've been doing on it. More people have taken steps to FireSmart their home. Yeah,
Good.
it's notable. And then more notable changes, so housing. So it's hard for you to see here, I've just noted the page number on there, it's page 22 of the report. So the few differences here in level of government you consider to be primarily responsible. Fewer people seem to think it's the local government.
Yeah, well, that's good.
We need more housing. Fewer people seem to think we need more housing, of the respondents in the survey. This is, you can't really see this, but, sorry, but that's another one. So that was demonstrated in the weighted average comparison there, 2018 and 2019. So these are the actual numbers associated with that. So you can see there, just for example, diversity of housing types on Bowen. In 2018, it was 49.26% that thought it was very important, and this year it was 34%, so it's down almost 10%.
And the
It
next
might
one's-
also-
Next one's the same.
Might also reflect the building going on Miller Creek, for example. Changes.
Or the people that couldn't
Yeah. The
couldn't
floating,
find housing.
the floating marina.
So here's more notable changes in the housing section, housing gaps. As you can see here, that's gone down a little bit as well, almost 10% in the main category, which is affordable rental. Which housing types are needed? Again, that's gone down a little bit, but still, interestingly, tiny houses that people seem to think we need more of, small detached homes.
And it's interesting that the no additional housing types has gone from 4% to 11%.
So here's housing again. Our top three challenges are the same, but again, lower in each category. Lack of affordable housing, lack of employee housing, and lack of rental housing. So this is notable results from the local economy section. So this just demonstrates that most people have heard of community economic development, but don't know much about it. So that's 33% of respondents. And in people's opinion about the economy 4 years ago and 4 years from now, most people have no opinion or don't know. This demonstrates that people are doing a lot of shopping on Bowen Island as opposed to in other municipalities nearby. And the little word cluster thing there is just a demonstration of where people put in the other category. So how satisfied are you with the quality and availability of goods and services locally? People are generally satisfied. the strategic plan, and in order to save you another resolution every year, I'd recommend that you direct staff to carry out the island survey annually, and that way we can just work it into our operational kind of work plan. Any questions?
No, that's well done. There's some interesting, you really have to sort of dig down into it. There's some interesting statistics in there.
So I apologize, I haven't gone into the demographics. I'm worried that the differences in data, or the differences in the responses on housing have more to do with the different people who happen to answer the survey. And I'd want to look at the demographics and try to understand that. My worry about the survey is, so I used to work for a public opinion research firm, and I've done a lot of work with that sort of stuff. And the trouble is, the troubling factor is always who answers your survey. And that's why, you know, you're actually better off with a random survey where you can actually use quite a small number of people. But if it's random, then you can compare it year after year after year because you know you're looking at data that's comparable. So if you get just a slightly different gang of people responding, then it throws all the data out of whack. And I'd like to, and I haven't done this, I could go into the demographic stuff and see if I can figure it out a bit. So I'm just worried about that. And if we did the trouble is to do an actual survey costs quite a lot more money to do a random survey.
Yeah.
I think we have multiple sources of data though. So for example, on housing, we have a survey that Birch did. And we have this, and we have the housing needs assessment coming up. So we end up getting a fuller picture, triangulated.
Put them all together, Michael.
Can I just ask, every year or every other year? I mean, look, that's not a criticism, that's a question. Does it need to be done every single year, or would you do it every other year?
It's up to...
I know, I mean, every year? I just thought, every 2 years. Well, yeah, get a bit of, you know, we do this, we have to do this every year, you know, it comes around about Christmas, well, jingle bells. I mean, I just wonder whether every other year is good to go. And for the truly remedial group, as this is such dynamic bedtime reading, do you actually have a hard copy available, even on loan?
Yeah.
Okay, I will return it rather than you have to print them out. But to read these, I don't know about everybody else, but to read this on a screen, and there is so much great information here. So I have to raise my hand and say, I actually need a hard copy to.
Yes, please.
I'm not the only one.
I can print more copies for everyone.
Yeah, I hate to ask you to do that because I know what we're saying, but still. I admit it.
Did we come to a landing on annually or biannually?
I think
biannually, I like that better.
And it makes the information more useful too, because you can tell bigger differences then too. Like if it's just year by year, it's always going to be little slivers of difference. And it'd be nice.
Dennis was just saying if we did it twice in our term, in a 4-year term, you know. that might
Although
probably
it'd be nice to do it like within the first year and then the third year, so council, because if it's at the end of a term, it doesn't do, you know.
Basically what you're saying, yeah.
I'd say you got back in October of 18.
Yeah.
So you did it at the end of 19,
Yeah.
and if you did it at the end of 21, the election is a year later.
That makes sense, so that's.
That way the next
2 years from now.
council, it's about a year in when they do it again, so it works out every 2 years or so. Yeah, maybe that's what we should recommend.
Okay, so just carry out the island survey once again in 2021?
Yep.
Or
Yeah.
biannually.
Yes, that's basically.
Okay.
So moved.
Yeah.
All right, so moved, seconded, all in favor?
Yep.
There you go.
Thank you.
Hey, well, very much, Sophie. Great document, so.
Here comes
Okay, correspondence.
Okay.
So we got a correspondence here from Diane Ramage. And who's gonna take this on? Bonny. Frog signs.
So I was tasked with responding to Ms. Ramage's letter to council regarding endangered frogs and other amphibians on Bowen Island. So she was asking, actually, in her correspondence dated October 8th, 2019. She was asking that amphibian and small mammal crossings be installed wherever they are needed. So staff actually put together a bit of response, and really, as it stands right now, amphibian crossings, I just dealt with amphibians primarily. They involve, tunnels, the efficacy of which are not well understood. I've read lots of studies, and for some species, certain types of tunnels work fairly well, for others it doesn't. So given our relatively low speeds and volumes of cars on Bowen roads, what we're suggesting to start is to put up 2 signs, frog crossing signs, on Mount Gardner Road, just on either end.
Do you have a graphic?
I didn't. I actually looked at some today, but I didn't. I didn't.
frogs
I
go
know
across.
there are some pretty comical ones, but I didn't.
Yeah,
I didn't put one down.
Yeah.
So to put 2 signs up, knowing that frogs do cross Mount Gardner Road. March is one time during their start of the breeding season, and also after there's been a hatch, sort of later on in the summer. So $200 approximately for 2 signs. And also, we're looking at 2020 being a real educational year. And Frog Day, there's International World Frog Day on March 20th, 2020. And it happens every year. So Carl and I were looking at maybe going to the schools and just doing a little talk about amphibians, being that they're harbingers of health, of ecosystem health. All kidding aside, the image of people scooping up frogs and crossing the street with them, does sort of conjure up some comical images perhaps, but all kidding aside, they are really important indicators of ecosystem health. So that's what the recommendation is that council directs staff to install 2 frog crossing signs on Mount Gardner Road, and that also council directs staff to prepare educational materials about amphibians, and we could go do some communications to the schools. And also, I just put as a 3rd staff recommendation that council consider installation of amphibian crossings, perhaps when constructing new roads or reconstructing existing roads that pass through amphibian habitat.
Good.
Well, I'll lead off. I'd be happy to lead off. As a nature-friendly island within the Islands Trust, I think this is a modest beginning to something that I think could be a selling point for Bowen in terms of people don't want to run over frogs. I think their amphibian crossings could be a feature, a kind of fun thing about Bowen. And as we know, the nature and the trails are an asset, and this is right beside Crippen Regional Park, part of it. And salamanders cross too. Especially the really narrow part, I'm wondering about, I think the Killarney Lake picnic area, that end of the lake, up until Hiker's Trail is about the most, from my experience for about 5 years driving through there at night. Luckily, they mostly cross at in late at night. But that's the hot spot. Once you start climbing the hill again towards Hiker's Trail, even they drop off because they're coming down from that whole hillside down to that breeding area of the shallows near the Killarney Lake picnic area. Anyway, that's a little info for you from somebody who has watched frogs for all these many years. I also think it's important just because if we want to highlight what we do to protect wildlife, we've got deer crossing signs up. Why wouldn't we put up frog crossings? They are fragile indicators, like you say. The diseases globally are really affecting frogs and changing climate and things like that. I think it's a good idea to get ahead to protect one of our major breeding grounds and the adult frogs and young frogs coming to and from. So I support this.
You want to move it?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
And we'll discuss it after.
Maybe, oh, yeah.
That council directs staff to install frog crossing signs on the Mount Gardner Road allowance near Killarney Lake, so I give you more options there. that council direct staff to prepare educational material about amphibians for communications channels and to present information to Bowen Island Community School and Discover School on Pacific School on World Frog Day, March 20th, 2020. And that council considered installation of amphibian crossings when constructing new roads and multi-use pathways and reconstructing existing roads that pass through or near amphibian habitat. You got that one? Thank you.
All right. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Dave. Further discussion, Rob?
Yeah, so I'll be voting for this, and I live right around Killarney Lake, and I've seen the frogs going there, so this is not a frog issue. And maybe this is maybe a question to Dennis, or feel free to chime in. It's more of a process issue. So somebody writes in a letter with a suggestion, okay, and we get a staff recommendation.
We asked for one.
Did we ask for one?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
thank
so
you.
it's-
That's the
yeah,
process,
yeah.
thanks, that's it, yeah.
Okay,
That's the answer I would give.
Good. That's what I'd answer.
I'd just like to raise one question in defence of frogs here. There are specific times when they cross. Okay, my only question is, we put up a static sign 365 days a year. Could I raise the question whether if that sign was put up at this time and this time, it would have more effect? That sign, 365 days a year, people are just going to, in the end, it's part of the scenery.
Can we
Put it up,
yeah,
put it up at the right time, and someone said, wow, oh, an interesting sign, this is frog, whatever time, that's why they hop across. And, you know, people might pick that up more than just a static sign year round. Just as a suggestion.
One thing that you might not, information you might not have is that in the lights of the car, the little eyes, the speckly little lights down there on the road light up. So if you had an awareness that, oh, right, frog crossing, you might twig and slow down, or scoot some of them off to.
But the problem is, people aren't gonna slow down if it only happens, was it 2 months a year?
It's like a deer crossing sign.
Yeah, but they're not crossing all year long.
Just
Deer
a little
crossing
more
all year
Deer
long.
cross all year round.
Oh, do they?
Deer?
Oh, deer do, but the frogs aren't, from what I'm hearing.
There's certain different pockets and sometimes you, yeah,
There's a bunch
stragglers.
Why don't we just
There's a bunch of
refer
species.
that comment to staff and think about?
Yes.
Whatever works. It's not designed to be in any way to inhibit the motion. I'm just raising the question that, you know, let's not get sign fatigue. Let's try and protect the frog.
It's more expensive to change.
Little cry wolf operation here.
Maybe we should get some marshalling out there too.
Okay, so I'll ask the question, all in favor? Thank you, that is unanimous. And, okay, the Finance Advisory Committee, this is reports of Committees, Calendar Commission. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Oh, hey, just before we send Bonnie away, are we gonna do the pull from the agenda bit, or is there another?
What are we gonna do?
We pulled Bonnie's report.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's,
3.1, 3.4, 3.5, or 3.9, one of them.
I think there was 3.1.
Bonnie,
Bonnie?
just, yeah, why don't you just step up to the,
3.5 is the.
step up to the.
3.5.
It's the loo.
No, that's the pause one.
And we
I'm
had a
just
couple of
changing
staff
the wording of
reports,
the
so we let
resolution.
you get out of here, so if you wanna answer to these, we'll get them out of the way, 3.4 and 3.5, yeah. So 3.4 was,
Michael, me.
yes, Michael.
That's me. Bonnie, why don't you just answer a technical question? And as you know, everybody was highly appreciative, Bruce, of the work that you had done, and I know you've accepted that. Some very time ago, in the last session, we established this license of occupation. And I can't remember exactly, Bonnie, what year that was.
I think 2000.
Was it 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, 2016 or 2017.
Okay, so we now have a license of occupation that we established in Mannion Bay. And if I remember correctly, one of the reasons we did it was to give the municipality a higher level of control. I mean, very broadly speaking, or a high level of influence in the bay. Okay, and that's correct, is it? Okay, then the question then that follows on after that, with a higher level of influence, went to all the trouble, and it was a lot of trouble to get that license of occupation. Do we also have a higher level of responsibility? Because we've now given ourselves a license of occupation, giving us certain jurisdiction over the space. is there an element of responsibility that comes with that license of occupation? And I'm not going to put you in a difficult position, because that has always, I've always had at the back of my mind, when I see these submerged boats, and I think of all the garbage down there with that submerged boat, by when I see the mast sticking up or whatever else, and heaven forbid on a misty night someone should just run their boat right over the top, or whatever, however bad it gets or anything else, or all the rest of these craft. And please, it's not for answer now, but just for your thoughts. Do we have a higher level of responsibility? As we are technically now, it comes under our jurisdiction. So that's just a question I pose. And the other thing is, I did take Bruce Russell's point, where I think it's the most frustrating. When you are having to deal with craft from repeat offenders. Now, I don't know, and this is not for tonight's discussion, but if there is anything you can think that you would put forward as for do that, because I understand their frustration when they're dealing with the same owner, not once, but twice, or heaven forbid, even more. And I believe that's the case, Bonny, am I right?
Yeah, so I am researching right now, I'm conducting research, and I'm working with RCMP, local RCMP, and with the new act, Direct Abandonment or Hazardous, it's Bill C-64 that came into force in July of this past year. So there are some changes forthcoming, and I believe maybe some more support from Transport Canada and through Coast Guard, perhaps. And also just I have some questions, I won't divulge them yet, but I would like to come back to council maybe in a few months with what I found as far as tactics or legalities or enforcement options, potential enforcement options for dealing with repeat offenders. So it's something that I am researching, and I think the license of occupation, you're going back to your question of do we have increased responsibility. I mean, we do have a management plan that we adhere to, but we also follow all laws of the land, per se. In that, when there's a submerged vessel, we contact Coast Guard, Transport Canada, all the regulatory bodies. So we do our due diligence. So I don't believe it opens us to any liabilities with that respect, but we do, yeah, it's a multi-tiered, as council knows, anything to do with the waters is this multi-tiered, multi-leveled approach.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I just felt I just had to raise it as a problem in the other Gulf Islands as well, which I know we've shared. There are 2 points raised and answered, so thank you very much. Thank you.
So I'll move the council receive the 2019 Mannion Bay Summary Report dated November 29th, 2019 for information.
Okay, so on second, all in favor, thank you, that's passed unanimously.
And I pulled 3.5.
3.5, yeah.
The first clause in the resolution says, therefore be it resolved that council direct staff to include a provision for cause of $4,000 per year in the multi-year core funding. You got to apply for multi-year core funding, and it's really more appropriate, the wording like we just had in 6.2, that it be considered in the budget. So the amended wording I emailed over to Hope is that council refer the request for multi-year core funding for cause of $4,000 per year to the 2020-2024 financial plan process. And that way it'll get considered through the proper processes rather than us saying, this is in the budget.
Could you read that again?
Oh, or not what I sent you, or do you want?
I can read it. Just that one or the whole?
Well, I could read the whole, better read the
Without
whole
the
resolution.
Without the whereas.
You don't need to wear those.
So just the one section
Yeah.
is therefore be resolved that council further request for multi-year core funding for cause of $4,000 per year to the 2020 to 2024 financial plan process.
And
That's
the
the part
council,
that's changed.
and the council direct staff to facilitate an educational event in 2020 about craft.
Yeah, that, all,
Same.
the stuff, the other parts all remain.
Yes.
Oh, second.
Okay,
You moved it, yeah. I seconded.
any further discussion, all in favor? Thank you, passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Very much.
Well, this
Appreciate that.
Gary, I also pulled 3.9, but also.
Yeah, we're not there yet. Oh,
But
you
involved
said
Bonnie.
2.9, is that hers?
So that's Bonnie too.
Wow.
It's going to,
3.9?
yeah, so if everybody clicks on it, you'll see that it's the minutes of the Environment and Climate Action Committee meeting, November 7th, and if you scroll down to the very end, and it's on the bottom of the penultimate page. And so it was moved and seconded that the Environment Climate Action Committee recommend that council direct staff to include an ecological, environmental, climate implications section of the staff to council report template. Now, I wasn't at that meeting, and I didn't know about this, but I actually came to the same conclusion independently, and so I told, at the last meeting, I said to Bonnie, we actually need this, and Bonnie said, well, you should perhaps check your agenda, and it's right there. But the reason I'm recommending that I think this is really important is that in developing that, I was actually thinking about the implementation or the amendments to the climate change strategy that's going through various committees right now. And the thing about climate change is there's no bullet, there's no silver bullet that fixes the whole thing. It's an array of different things, often small, sometimes big, but it's almost everything that you do has an implication in some way or another, especially around the adaptation part where we're looking at things differently in some way. So so it would be very useful to have that, just like we have financial implications and communication implications, sort of the climate and environmental implications. Often it'll be not applicable, you just go through it, but often it is applicable and it would be useful to have it. So that's why I wanted to pull it, because it's in a minutes. Lots of you wouldn't have even seen it. Many of you have all seen it, but you might have just zipped by it. And so I just wanted to highlight that out.
It was in the consent agenda, which we all knew.
I know, Allison. That's excellent. So that's why, anyway, I'd like to just...
I'd just like to
Move
speak.
the motion then.
Yeah, I'll move the motion.
Okay.
Okay, yes.
I wanted to speak in support of the motion. I do this with the Gabriel Keats Local Trust Committee, and it's very effective.
Perfect, all in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you, unanimous.
Thank you. Thanks, Bonnie.
Thanks, Bonnie. Oh, wait. No,
No,
just-
Run.
Go, good.
Yeah, it was never catch up again. So here we are at reports of the committees, commissions, and the Financial Advisory Committee.
Okay, I'll do this one.
All right.
It's, the three resolutions are there for information only, and they were discussed at the FAC. So the real one is that council directs staff to include a budget provision in the 2020 proposed five-year financial plan for funding to Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're gonna leave it up to Raj to figure out what number and everything, but,
Second.
Any further conversation on this? Basically, it's just, we've had the conversation already, and I think it's just.
and we had a further conversation at a meeting
Yeah.
with Bert at the,
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, we did.
And they're coming back with some more information.
Could you, just before we do that, but there was also the part where you advised that they take the multi-port funding for.
Yeah, well, that's
what was it?
recommended, those
From
are.
2 to 4 years, why'd you go from 2 to 4 years on that one?
That was
I
number
had a
3.
discussion
above
with
it.
them, they misunderstood when they filled out their
They did.
application.
Oh, is that what it was? Stories?
It's for 4 years.
Yeah, because they couldn't figure out why they only went for 2.
Yeah.
So that's how that shook down. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. And so we've had a first and second, all in favor? Thank you. That is.
Turn that page
So
over.
who told you that?
I did. It's just a little, it's a terminology thing. Let me find it.
I think I might have already lost it, but
You probably have.
I saw something when I was looking at them, but I can't remember what it was now.
It's the bullet point on the second page. Support for the change of seasonal rental to, it says rental guest accommodation. It should be residential guest
Residential.
accommodation.
Thank you.
Okay, to read the recommendation.
I second that. Oh.
The minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held November 25th, 2019, be adopted.
As amended.
As amended, thank you. And I got a second from Rob, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
He was so way behind him, so we can shorten the report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can make it 1 minute instead of 5.
Yeah, or 30 seconds.
Okay, so we'll start off with David Hockey, update on Metro.
Okay, so in 30 seconds, I'll go really quick. If you go to the board and brief, it's 13.2 in your information items.
Oh, we're done then.
I'm going to now speak to 2 things. Now I gotta find where it is in there. It is. Sorry, the seconds are just ticking by. It is 4.1 and 4.3 in that. So, yeah, 4.1, the alignment of federal, provincial, and local government greenhouse gas targets. So this is actually important. So we've set the targets of zero CO2 by 2050. Metro Vancouver has set that. The feds have said they're going to do that. The province hasn't. And so I had a conversation with Chair Dallowell at UBCM that we should get the province to do that. So I moved the recommendation at the Climate Action Committee, and it was just approved by the board, so that's going to the province.
Oh, good for you.
The importance about that is to do with BC Ferries and an array of other things. If BC Ferries, if the province has a zero emissions by 2050, they have to think of any long-lasting capital, such as boats. And so that gets to the whole issue of electric ferries and electric foot passenger ferries. So if you look at the next 4.3 electric river bus service for Fraser River communities. So that also came up at the Climate Action Committee, and I also asked that go to staff, that they look not just at the Fraser River, but at salt water for folks from Bowen Island, because they now are developing electric foot passenger boats, but we need to have that as part of our regional transportation planning. So that went to Metro Vancouver staff to go to their long-term planning for both Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy and the Climate Change Plan. So I'm also having conversations with the City of Vancouver municipal councillors about finding some place to have boats, foot passenger boats, more on the Vancouver side. And so I had some chats with Dennis about that too, and it's going to be difficult, but I just chatted with Emma about finding a way to talk about the sea bus terminus, if there's some way that it can be done there.
Being considered.
I know, I know, it's being considered. So anyway, those are all things that are sort of, in motion, but really important on that whole moving towards electric foot passenger service. Going directly downtown, it would be amazing for us.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you.
Okay, so that was me.
Sue Ellen, Michael?
Yeah, I can
Go ahead.
do it lightning fast. We just got back from the Victoria Trust Council meeting. We carpooled back and took the transit because we passed a strategic plan that was really heavy on climate. And we also examined our draft budget that's also very climate focused. It's down a little bit because we took out the big water study, but I don't think that'll affect the Bowen part. And I just wanted to mention 13.3 in our package has a letter that the trust has sent to the province about greater support for solar energy in rural or remote communities. And this is something I'll flag tomorrow in emergency program because it has to do with small islands and power outages and being prepared for that. That's my quick report.
Thank you.
If I can just add mine, Jerry.
Yeah.
We did indeed go to Victoria, and we returned, and we're still friends.
That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Travel buddies.
Travel had a happy ending.
Now, two significant things, I think. Firstly, the Island Trust, let's talk about the strategic plan. They have put all efforts, genuine efforts, to try and make the strategic plan as focused and as unwordy as possible. And with 26 trustees, they've got a problem times what we've got. And they did their best, but they still, and everyone maximum effort. But it is so hard, and we'll soon face this issue, to get a strategic plan that isn't a job checklist. And I guess they kind of succeeded, although it didn't get unanimous approval. I hope that when we do our strategic plan, it does get unanimous approval. It's really hard to go forward without everyone agreeing on that document. The other area which let's see how close to home this is, the operating budget, their subtotal on this draft, and I repeat, it's a draft budget, was just a little under 400,000, and that may be 350,000 now, more than this year, which is about 5.5% increase. So that obviously struggled. But when you drill down, the one area that the Island Trust were faced with is their salary and wages, which this year, if this budget was passed as it stands, it increased nearly $320,000, which is 6.5%. Now the issue is, and I've referred to it here with Raj, if you go back to 2016, the Island Trust salary and wages budget, or actual, was $4 million and change. If this budget was to be approved as it stands, it's 5,168,000, which is a nearly 30% increase, and an additional 1,168,000. So it just goes to show that with the best intention of the world, and I think it's something we're going to have to go back on, and I've harped on it, that we are going to have to look and make sure that what did we do the year before? Because issues facing the Island Trust, and believe me, these people were very sincere in the way they've approached it, and just no different to ours. There's always a good reason for everything, and sometimes it just doesn't look too good when you add it all together. It was a great meeting, and I think we moved some rocks, and I think we realized we have some common issues when we face the challenge of strategic plans and just finances generally. So that's how I put it. That it was a good meeting in Victoria, and a lot of good conversation.
Great. Well, thank you very much, trustees. So we'll go to 11.3, which would be Maureen.
We haven't met, so nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. And Allison, Translink Mayor.
Meeting is coming up, and I forgot to look at the detail of the agenda. But the one interesting thing, we've had a bunch of closed meetings talking about where the money's coming from to do the rest of the mayor's plan. But, and the public consultation on Transportation 2050, the first round is out, and that's what is under little A. I've got all the links to the report and the video. So go and have a look at that, because it's some very interesting information from the surveys that people were asked. Let's just say that.
All right, thank you, Allison. And, okay, 11.5 is we're going to move to a closed meeting. Council moved to a closed meeting immediately following the regular council meeting to discuss items pursuant to section 9.
Question.
Oh,
Or your.
we're not quite there yet,
Well, why don't we move
isn't it?
to
We're
close?
passing a motion to move, we haven't.
Yeah, we're not shutting her down yet. Just getting ready to shut her
Can't
down.
go home yet.
Section 91, sections A, C, I, and K of the community charter. A is personal information about the identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. C is labor relations or other employee relations. And I, yeah. The receipt of advice is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communication necessary for that purpose. And K is negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of the municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that in view of the council could reasonably expect it to harm the interests of the municipality if they're held in public. So that's a recommendation. Thank you, Allison. And over to Maureen for a second. All in favor? All right, so item was removed from the consent agenda. I think we went back and covered all those. Yes. And we have some information items, and then we get down to, that's it. Oh, no, question period.
My only, the clause thing, so when you say that refer the 4,000 to the budget process, that doesn't mean you're saying give them $4,000, that means say consider
It'll
it?
get considered.
Consider, yeah.
You're not directing staff to say, put it in?
No, not at this point in time.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
If that's all the questions, we're going to adjourn the general meeting. Thank you very much. Keep closing the door, Will. Thank you.
Thank you.